My daughter grabbed my phone out of my hands and smashed it on the floor. With pure attitude, she said, "You won't need that anymore. I'll decide what's best for you." The next day, I disappeared without saying a word. When she tried to track me down, she panicked after seeing what I had done. Imagine a life so perfectly constructed, a love so deeply trusted, that when it shatters, you question not just your partner, but your very own mind. That's where my nightmare began, trapped in a gilded cage, watching my own daughter become a weapon against me. The air in our sprawling suburban home had grown thick with a different kind of silence lately, not peaceful, but heavy with unspoken accusations and veiled threats. It was a Tuesday evening, the last sliver of sunset barely clinging to the windows, when I felt the cold, hard reality of my new prison. My daughter, Chloe, ripped my phone from my hands. Her eyes, once so full of innocent affection, now blazed with a chilling contempt. She slammed it onto the pristine hardwood floor. The screen spiderwebbed instantly, a brutal echo of my own breaking heart. "You won't need this anymore," she declared, her voice devoid of warmth. "I'll decide what's best for you." I stared at Chloe, this young woman who was a stranger in my own home. At 28, she had her father David's sharp features and my stubborn chin, but something in her gaze had shifted, hardened. When had my sweet little girl transformed into this controlling stranger? "Mom, are you even listening?" she sighed, a dramatic, exasperated sound. "This is exactly why Dad and I need to manage everything for you. You're getting worse." She bent to pick up the mangled phone, a gesture of almost theatrical concern. I didn't respond. What was the point? For the past year, ever since David, my husband of 30 years, had subtly convinced Chloe that I was experiencing a mental decline, they had systematically isolated me. My friends stopped calling, my finances became their domain, and my every move was monitored. All while I watched, a silent, increasingly desperate prisoner in my own life. "We're doing this because we love you," Chloe continued, her voice softening just a touch, as if trying to soothe a child. "Dad says your paranoia and forgetfulness are getting worse. You need us." The word stung. I remembered a time she would have defended me against anyone, even her father. But David had always been incredibly persuasive. As the town's most respected financial advisor, people trusted him implicitly. Our daughter trusted him. I trusted him. Until I found those transactions. "I need to rest," I said quietly, my hand trembling slightly. "I think I'll lie down." Chloe's rigid expression relaxed. "Good idea. Dad will be home late tonight. Some emergency with the Wilson accounts. I'll check on you before I leave for dinner with Kevin." Kevin, her fiancé, another financial advisor who worked for David's firm. I'd met him 3 times, and each time, something about his easy compliance with Chloe's manufactured stories about my condition made me deeply uneasy. I retreated to my bedroom, the one place they still allowed me some semblance of privacy, though I suspected cameras had been installed somewhere. I closed the door, sinking onto the edge of my bed, pressing my hands against my face. At 58, I wasn't young, but I certainly wasn't losing my mind. The mental decline they insisted I was experiencing was their creation, a careful fabrication that had begun shortly after I questioned David about strange withdrawals from our joint accounts. "Investment opportunities," he'd explained dismissively. "Nothing you need to worry about, Sarah." But I had worried. I'd always handled our household finances while David managed investments. These withdrawals, $50,000 here, $75,000 there, were unlike anything I'd seen in our 3 decades together. When I'd pressed for details, showing him the statements, his face had darkened momentarily before softening into feigned concern. "Honey, we discussed this last month. Don't you remember? Dr. Miller said these memory lapses might happen. But we hadn't discussed it, and I hadn't seen any doctors. That was the beginning. Small comments about my forgetfulness. Missed appointments I was certain I hadn't made. Keys and documents moved from where I'd placed them. David's concerned discussions with friends and family about my episodes. By the time I truly realized what was happening, it felt too late. He'd convinced our daughter, our friends, even my sister Emily, who lived across the country. My desperate attempts to explain were dismissed as confusion or paranoia, further evidence of my decline. I reached under my mattress and pulled out the small notebook I'd been keeping. Dates, conversations, bank statements I'd managed to photograph before David locked me out of the accounts. My proof, my desperate hope that no one would believe. The doorbell rang, startling me. I quickly returned the notebook to its hiding place and listened. "Mrs. Campbell isn't accepting visitors," I heard Chloe say firmly from downstairs. "I understand, but I'm not here to see Sarah. I'm delivering these financial documents for David." A woman's voice, unfamiliar, professional. "I can take those," Chloe insisted. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Campbell specifically asked that I wait and give them to him personally. Confidential client information." I moved quietly to my bedroom door, opening it just a crack. From the top of the stairs, I could see a tall woman in a crisp business suit standing at our front door, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. "Well, he won't be home for hours," Chloe said, irritation creeping into her voice. "You'll have to come back tomorrow." The woman glanced at her watch. "I see. Perhaps I could leave my card then." She reached into her pocket, and her eyes flicked upward, meeting mine through the narrow opening of my door. There was no change in her expression, but something in her gaze, a momentary sharpness, made me freeze. "Here you are," she said, handing Chloe a business card. "Please tell your father I'll be in touch." After Chloe closed the door, I retreated back to my bed, my heart pounding. Something about that woman seemed oddly familiar, though I was certain we'd never met. 15 minutes later, I heard Chloe's footsteps approaching my door. "Mom, I'm heading out to meet Kevin. Dad should be home around 9 o'clock. There's soup in the fridge if you get hungry." Her voice was gentler now, almost the daughter I remembered. "Thank you, sweetheart," I managed, hating the tremor in my voice that she would surely interpret as another sign of weakness. I listened as she descended the stairs, grabbed her keys, and left. The house fell silent, and for the first time in days, I was truly alone. I waited another 10 minutes, watching Chloe's car disappear down the street. Then I pulled out my emergency burner phone, purchased months ago during a rare, unsupervised trip to the pharmacy, paid for with cash I'd been secretly saving from household money. I had one chance to get this right. Tomorrow, everything would change. My fingers shook as I typed out the text message I'd rehearsed countless times. "Ready? 10 a.m. tomorrow. Bring everything we discussed." I sent it to the only number programmed into the phone, then deleted the message. The next morning, I woke before dawn. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing comfortable clothes and practical shoes. I packed a small bag with essentials and the notebook containing my evidence. At 7:30, I heard David leave for his morning tennis game, a Saturday ritual he never missed. Chloe wouldn't arrive until around noon. She always slept late on weekends. At precisely 9:45, I walked out the front door of the house where I'd lived for 28 years, locking it behind me. I didn't look back. By the time Chloe came to check on me later that day, she would find the note I'd left on my perfectly made bed. When she saw what I had done, I knew panic would set in. Not for my safety, but for what was about to be exposed. I sat in a small cafe 2 towns over, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea I couldn't bring myself to drink. The morning crowd had thinned, leaving just a few patrons scattered among the tables. At precisely 10 a.m., the bell above the door chimed. The woman from yesterday, the one who had delivered documents to my house, walked in, scanning the room until her eyes found mine. She moved with confidence, sliding into the seat across from me. "Sarah," she said, not a question, but a confirmation. "I'm Meredith Hansen." Up close, I could see she was perhaps 10 years younger than me, her dark hair showing only a few strands of silver. Her eyes were sharp, observant. "You were at my house yesterday," I said, keeping my voice low. "How did you know who I am?" "Your sister, Emily, hired me." She placed a business card on the table. "Hansen Investigations." I nearly knocked over my tea. "Emily." "But she believes I'm." "She did," Meredith corrected, "until she received this." She slid a sealed envelope across the table. Emily's handwriting marked it as returned mail. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside was a birthday card I'd sent Emily 3 months ago, along with a handwritten letter detailing my suspicions about David. A letter I'd never actually mailed. David intercepted it, I whispered, the pieces falling into place. He must have been going through my things. Meredith nodded. Emily received that envelope 2 weeks ago, forwarded anonymously. She called me immediately. But who would? We'll get to that, Meredith said, checking her watch. Right now, we need to move. Your husband has already been to the house. He found your note. My stomach clenched. In my letter, I'd written only that I needed time away to think, that I would be in touch when I was ready. I'd said nothing about my suspicions or plans. Still, David would know I'd escaped his carefully constructed cage. What about Chloe? I asked, thinking of my daughter. He's called her. She's on her way to the house now. Meredith stood. My car is out back. We have a lot to do today. I followed her to a nondescript sedan parked behind the cafe. As we drove, Meredith explained what she'd discovered in the 3 weeks since Emily had hired her. Your husband has been systematically draining accounts for nearly 2 years. Not just yours, but client funds, too. He's incredibly careful. Uses shell companies, makes everything look like legitimate investments. The Wilsons, I said, remembering what Chloe had mentioned yesterday. He said there was an emergency with their accounts. Meredith's gaze flicked to me in the rearview mirror. The Wilsons discovered discrepancies. David's been scrambling to cover his tracks. We arrived at a small motel on the outskirts of a neighboring town. Inside a modest room, I found my sister Emily waiting. Sarah, she rushed forward, enveloping me in a tight hug. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I should have known better. Tears stung my eyes as I returned her embrace. Emily had always been my protector, my confidant. David had managed to drive a wedge between us, but here she was when I needed her most. There's someone else you need to meet, Meredith said, checking her phone. She should be here soon. Who? I asked, wiping away tears. The person who sent the envelope to your sister. 20 minutes later, a knock at the door announced her arrival. Meredith opened it, and I gasped. Mrs. Campbell, said Rebecca Wilson, the wife of one of David's wealthiest clients. We'd attended the same charity functions for years, but had never been close. Rebecca, you sent the letter. She nodded, taking a seat at the small table. I've been suspicious of David for months. Thomas, my husband, trusts him implicitly, but I noticed changes in our portfolio statements. When Thomas confronted him, David always had explanations that sounded reasonable. So, you started watching him? Meredith said. Yes. I followed him one afternoon and saw him checking your mail before you got home. He opened several letters, including one addressed to Emily. The look on his face when he read it. Rebecca shuddered. I knew something was wrong. Rebecca made copies of everything before sending the original to Emily, Meredith explained. She's been our inside source ever since. My head was spinning. But what about the Wilsons' emergency Chloe mentioned? Rebecca's expression darkened. Thomas finally listened to me and requested a full audit of our accounts. David's been trying to prevent that from happening. We have evidence of embezzlement, Meredith said, opening her laptop. Not just from your accounts, but from at least 12 clients. The total is close to $3 million. I felt lightheaded. Where's the money? Some is in offshore accounts. Some was used to fund a secret life your husband's been building. A secret life? What do you mean? Meredith turned the laptop to face me. On the screen was a property listing for a beachfront home in Costa Rica, purchased 6 months ago by an LLC that traced back to David. She clicked to another tab. A woman in her 30s smiled back at me, her arm around David's waist. They stood on the deck of what appeared to be the same Costa Rica house. Her name is Jessica Lee, Meredith said gently. They've been seeing each other for almost 3 years. The room tilted. 3 years. While I was cooking his meals, sharing his bed, building our life together, David had been planning his escape with a younger woman using stolen money. Our money, his client's money. Does Chloe know? I whispered. We don't think so, Emily said, squeezing my hand. But there's more. Meredith scrolled to another document. Your mental decline is documented in medical records from Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller, a name I'd heard mentioned, but had never actually met. I've never seen this doctor. That's because he doesn't exist, Meredith said. The medical license number is fake. The office address is a vacant property David owns through another shell company. He created a false medical history for me, I said, the full extent of his betrayal hitting me. But why? If he wanted to leave, he could have just divorced me. Because of the prenuptial agreement you both signed, Emily reminded me. If he divorces you without cause, he gets nothing from your family's trust fund. The trust fund my parents had left me, not massive, but substantial enough that David had insisted on managing it throughout our marriage. I'd thought little about it over the years, trusting him completely. If you were declared mentally incompetent, however, Meredith added, he could be appointed your guardian, and your guardian would have complete control over the trust. And Chloe, I asked, where does she fit into this? Rebecca looked uncomfortable. Her fiancé, Kevin, he works for David. Is he involved? We're not sure yet, Meredith admitted. But here's what we do know. 2 days ago, David transferred a large sum to an account in Kevin's name. My burner phone buzzed with a text message. I looked down and felt the blood drain from my face. What is it? Emily asked, alarmed. I held up the phone. The message was from an unknown number. Mom, where are you? Dad found your note. He's frantic. Please come home. We just want to help you. Chloe, I whispered. She can't know about this phone, Meredith said sharply. How did she get the number? Before I could answer, another message appeared. If you don't come home by tonight, we'll have to report you missing. The police will consider you a danger to yourself because of your condition. Please, Mom, don't make this worse. I stared at the screen, realization dawning. David, I said, it's not Chloe. It's David using her phone. He's threatening you and letting us know he's still one step ahead, Meredith said grimly. The room fell silent as we all considered what this meant. David knew I had a secret phone. He was monitoring Chloe's communications, and now he was using my love for my daughter to try to lure me back. Rebecca was the first to speak. So, what do we do now? Now, I said, finding strength in my anger. We set a trap of our own. The plan came together faster than I expected. Within hours, Meredith had arranged everything we needed, making calls to contacts whose identity she kept confidential. Emily and Rebecca worked alongside her, each bringing their own strengths to our improvised war room. I watched them with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. 3 days ago, I'd been a prisoner in my own home. Now, I had allies, strong, capable women fighting for me. You need to respond to David's text, Meredith said, handing me back my burner phone. We need to buy time. I composed a careful message. I'm safe. Need space to think. Please don't involve police. We'll call tomorrow. Perfect, Meredith nodded. Vague enough to keep him guessing, but reassuring enough that he won't panic and do something rash. What if he traces the phone? Emily asked. He can't, Meredith assured us. It's a prepaid phone purchased with cash. Even if he has connections in the phone company, the most he could get is the general location when a text is sent, which is why we're sending it from here, Rebecca added, and then moving to another location immediately. The phone buzzed almost instantly with David's reply, Sarah, please. Chloe is worried sick. Whatever is bothering you, we can work through it. I love you. I felt a bitter laugh escape my throat. He's good, isn't he? If I didn't know better, I'd believe him. Sociopaths often are excellent manipulators, Meredith said matter-of-factly. Their lack of empathy allows them to lie without the tells most people have. Is that what David is, a sociopath? The thought that I'd spent 30 years with someone capable of such calculated deception made me feel hollow. Labels aren't important right now, Emily said gently. What matters is stopping him. An hour later, we checked into a different motel under Rebecca's name, paying cash. The room was similar to the first, clean but basic, with 2 double beds and a small table by the window. What about Chloe? I asked as we settled in. It was the question that had been gnawing at me all day. How do we make her see the truth? That's going to be the most difficult part, Meredith admitted. She genuinely believes her father's story about your mental health. Direct confrontation likely won't work. She'll just see it as confirmation of your paranoia. We need evidence she can't dismiss, Rebecca suggested. Something so irrefutable that even David can't explain it away. The medical records, I said suddenly. Dr. Miller doesn't exist. Right. If we can show Chloe that the doctor diagnosing me isn't real, it's a start, Meredith agreed. But David could claim you're seeing a different doctor, or that you're confused about the name. What about the offshore accounts? Emily suggested. Financial records proving he's been stealing? Again, he could claim those are legitimate investments you've forgotten about, Meredith countered. Remember, in Chloe's mind, you're the one who's confused. Rebecca had been quietly typing on her tablet. What about this? She turned the screen toward us, showing the photograph of David and Jessica Lee in Costa Rica. Infidelity is harder to explain away, but easier to forgive, I said quietly. If it comes down to believing her father is unfaithful or her mother is mentally ill, which is easier for Chloe to accept? The room fell silent as we considered the problem. I think we're approaching this wrong, Meredith finally said. We shouldn't be trying to convince Chloe directly. We need to create a situation where she discovers the truth herself. How? I asked. By using David's playbook against him, Meredith smiled grimly. He's been gaslighting you for months, making you question your own sanity. What if we turn the tables? Over the next few hours, our plan took shape. It was risky with multiple moving parts. But if it worked, David would be exposed not just to Chloe, but to everyone who mattered. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with everything I'd learned and everything still to come. Around 3 a.m., I slipped out of bed and sat by the window, watching the occasional car pass on the highway. Can't sleep, Emily whispered, joining me. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, I admitted. How could I have been so blind? Emily squeezed my hand. Because you loved him. Because you trusted him. That's not a weakness, Sarah. It's what makes you human. I let him isolate me from everyone, even you. And now we're fixing that. She looked at me intently. You're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, remember that. Morning came too quickly. Meredith arrived at 7 a.m. with coffee and pastries, along with a middle-aged man she introduced as Detective Mark Adams. Mark is an old friend, she explained. He works in financial crimes. The detective nodded at me. Mrs. Campbell, Meredith's filled me in. What your husband is doing crosses several legal boundaries. Embezzlement, fraud, identity theft with those fake medical records. But we need solid evidence, I said. Yes, and we need to move carefully. If David suspects law enforcement involvement, he could transfer the remaining funds somewhere untraceable, which is why today's meeting is so important, Meredith added. Are you ready? I nodded, though my stomach was in knots. At 10 a.m., I would meet David at a public park. My suggestion, sent via text late last night. He'd agreed immediately, clearly relieved I was willing to talk. Little did he know what I had planned. 2 hours later, I sat on a bench near the park's central fountain, exactly where I'd told David to meet me. Meredith and Detective Adams were positioned nearby, pretending to be a couple enjoying the morning. Emily and Rebecca waited in a car at the park entrance. I spotted David before he saw me. He was scanning the area, his customary confidence evident in his stride. When his eyes finally found me, relief washed over his features. Sarah, he said, approaching cautiously. Thank God you're all right. I remained seated, my hands folded in my lap. Hello, David. He sat beside me, leaving a respectful distance between us. You had us worried sick. Chloe has been beside herself. Has she? I asked mildly. Or have you told her she should be worried? His expression flickered. Briefly before settling back into concerned husband mode. I don't understand. Why did you leave like that? If something's bothering you, we can talk about it. That's what I'm doing now, I said, talking about what's bothering me. I opened my purse and removed a manila envelope, placing it between us on the bench. David's eyes fixed on it, a hint of weariness crossing his face. What's this? Evidence, I met his gaze steadily. Of everything you've been doing. The mask slipped for just a moment. A flash of anger, quickly controlled. Sarah, you're confused. This is exactly why Chloe and I are concerned. Costa Rica is beautiful this time of year, isn't it? I interrupted. Especially that beachfront property you purchased 6 months ago. The one you visit with Jessica Lee. David went very still. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I nudged the envelope toward him. It's all in there. The property records, the transfers from client accounts, the fake medical records for Dr. Miller, a doctor who doesn't exist. Who's been filling your head with these delusions? His voice had hardened. Is it Emily? I know she's always been jealous of our relationship. Stop. My voice was quieter than I intended, but it cut through his words like a knife. It's over, David. The lies, the manipulation, all of it. I know everything. His expression changed then, calculation replacing concern. He glanced around the park, then leaned closer. What exactly do you want, Sarah? Money? A divorce? Name your price. I want my daughter back, I said simply. I want her to know the truth. David laughed, a cold sound that sent shivers down my spine. Chloe believes what I tell her to believe. She thinks her mother is losing her mind. Who do you think she'll trust? The father who's been taking care of both of you, or the unstable woman who disappeared without warning? Let's find out, I said, reaching back into my purse. I pulled out my phone, not the burner, but a new one Meredith had provided. I pressed a button, and David's voice filled the space between us. Chloe believes what I tell her to believe. She thinks her mother is losing her mind. As the recording continued, a figure stepped out from behind a nearby tree. Chloe stood frozen, her face pale as she listened to her father's words in his own voice. David's eyes widened in genuine shock. Chloe, what are you doing here? She didn't answer him. Instead, she looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Mom. Her voice broke on the word. Is it true? Everything you've been saying. Before I could respond, David was on his feet. Don't listen to her. This is exactly what I warned you about. She's manipulating you, using edited recordings to turn you against me. Is Dr. Miller real? Chloe demanded, her voice stronger now. The doctor you said diagnosed Mom. Does he exist? Of course he exists. She's seen him multiple times. Then why, Chloe said, pulling out a piece of paper from her jacket, when I called the medical board this morning, did they tell me there's no Dr. Miller with that license number in the entire state? David's face contorted with rage, then quickly smoothed into a mask of paternal concern. It was fascinating and terrifying to witness his transformation, like watching an actor switch characters mid-scene. Chloe, honey, he said, his voice soft and reasonable. I don't know what your mother has told you, but you're misunderstanding the situation. Dr. Miller might have recently changed practices or... Stop it. Chloe cut him off. Her hands were shaking, but her voice remained steady. I called every Dr. Miller in the state. None of them have ever treated Mom. The address you gave me for his office, it's an empty storefront. I watched my daughter with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. She had done her own investigating, something I hadn't anticipated. Despite everything David had told her, some part of her had harbored doubts. David's eyes darted between us, calculating his next move. This is absurd. I've been taking care of both of you for years. Why would I, Jessica Lee, I interrupted quietly. His head snapped toward me, eyes narrowing. Your girlfriend, the house in Costa Rica, the money you've been stealing from clients to fund your new life. I reached into the envelope and pulled out several photographs. Rebecca Wilson has been very helpful. Rebecca? David's composure cracked. What does she have to do with this? She's been watching you, I explained, ever since she noticed discrepancies in her husband's accounts. Mom, Chloe whispered, her eyes fixed on the photos of David and Jessica Lee. How long have you known? I suspected something was wrong for months. But I only learned the full truth yesterday. I took a deep breath. Your father has been gaslighting me, Chloe, making me, and you, believe I was losing my mind when really he was stealing money and planning to leave. David suddenly lunged for the envelope, but Detective Adams appeared beside him, grasping his arm firmly. I wouldn't do that, Mr. Campbell, he said, flashing his badge. The color drained from David's face. Who are you? Detective Mark Adams. Financial crimes. He released David's arm, but positioned himself between us. We have some questions about certain irregularities in your client's accounts. David straightened his jacket, his lawyer mask sliding into place. I'm not discussing anything without my attorney present. That's your right, Detective Adams nodded. But we have enough to get warrants for your financial records, your home, and your office. Perhaps you'd like to cooperate now. Make things easier on yourself. This is ridiculous, David snarled. A misunderstanding blown out of proportion by my mentally unstable wife. Chloe stepped forward, placing herself at my side. Dad, I saw the medical records you showed me. I checked every detail. They're fake. You lied to me. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across David's face as he realized his daughter was slipping away from his influence. Chloe, please. Everything I've done for us, for our future. By stealing, she demanded. By lying? By making me think my own mother was going crazy. You don't understand, he said desperately. Your mother's family money is tied up in that trust. I had to what? I asked quietly. Convince everyone I was incompetent so you could control my inheritance while running off with your girlfriend? Meredith approached, standing beside Detective Adams. Mr. Campbell, we've been building a case against you for weeks. We have documentation of transfers from client accounts to offshore entities you control. We have evidence of the falsified medical records, and as of this morning, we have testimony from Jessica Lee herself. David's head jerked up. What? She's been very cooperative, Meredith continued, especially after learning you've been embezzling money. She thought you were wealthy from legitimate business. You got to Jessica Lee? His voice was barely audible. Costa Rican authorities picked her up this morning, Detective Adams said. Seems she was quite surprised to learn about your existing family arrangements. David's shoulders slumped momentarily before he straightened again, his eyes calculating. Whatever you think you have, it won't hold up. I'm not saying another word without my lawyer. That's fine, Detective Adams said, nodding to a uniformed officer who was approaching. David Campbell, you're under arrest for suspicion of fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent. As the officer led David away, I turned to find Chloe staring at me, her expression a mixture of confusion, pain, and dawning horror. Mom, I'm so sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I believed him. I helped him control you. Her voice broke on a sob. I pulled her into my arms, holding her as she cried against my shoulder. You didn't know, sweetheart. He manipulated both of us. But I should have seen it. The way he was so insistent about managing your medication, about keeping you isolated for your own good. I was so stupid. No, I said firmly, drawing back to look into her eyes. You trusted your father. That's what daughters do. But you also started questioning things, didn't you? You checked on Dr. Miller yourself. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Kevin told me I should trust Dad completely. That questioning the doctor would just upset you unnecessarily. But something felt wrong. She paused, her expression hardening. Kevin, did he know? Was he part of this? We're not sure yet, I admitted. But Detective Adams will be looking into that too. Emily and Rebecca approached us cautiously. Chloe looked surprised to see my sister. Aunt Emily, what are you doing here? Helping your mom, Emily said simply, giving Chloe a gentle hug. And this is Rebecca Wilson. She's been instrumental in uncovering what your father was doing. Chloe stared at Rebecca with dawning recognition. Mrs. Wilson, you and Mr. Wilson were at our house for dinner last month. Rebecca nodded. That's when I became certain something was wrong. I saw how your father treated your mother. The constant corrections, the little comments undermining her. It reminded me of my first husband. She touched Chloe's arm gently. Abusers don't always use their fists, dear. Chloe flinched at the word abuser, but didn't contradict it. What happens now? She asked instead. Now we go home, I said firmly. We reclaim our lives. The days that followed were a blur of police interviews, meetings with financial investigators, and uncomfortable revelations. Kevin, it turned out, had indeed been aware of at least some of David's schemes. The money transferred to his account was intended as a handling fee for helping maintain the fiction of my mental decline. Chloe was devastated. I was engaged to someone who was helping Dad gaslight you, she said one evening as we sat in the living room of our home, a home that felt both familiar and strange after everything that had happened. He manipulated you, too, I reminded her. Though I couldn't help the anger that surged when I thought of how Kevin had encouraged her to doubt me, to report my every word and action to David. I've been such a fool, she whispered. We both were, I admitted, but now we know better. A week after David's arrest, Chloe moved back home temporarily to help me sort through the financial mess he'd left behind. With Meredith and Detective Adams's help, we were gradually untangling David's web of deceit. Some of the money had been recovered, though much was still missing. There's something I need to show you, Chloe said one afternoon, her expression serious. She led me to her father's home office, a room I'd been avoiding. From a hidden compartment in his desk drawer, she pulled out a small black notebook. I found this yesterday, she explained, placing it in my hands. I think you should see it. I opened the notebook, my blood running cold as I read the first page. In David's precise handwriting was a detailed list: Sarah's behaviors to document, forgetfulness, move keys, wallet, phone regularly, confusion, change plans without telling her, then act concerned when she's unaware, paranoia, mention conversations that never happened. Each page that followed contained dated entries, a meticulous record of how he'd systematically gaslighted me for months. The final pages held something even more chilling. A timeline for having me declared legally incompetent, with Chloe named as a key guardian alongside David. The last entry was dated just 3 days before I'd left, fully committed to the plan. Appointment with Judge Morris scheduled for next month. Showing increasing signs of distress. Perfect timing. After guardianship secured, Phase 2 begins. I closed the notebook, my hands trembling, not with fear now, but with anger. What was Phase 2? Chloe asked quietly. I looked up at my daughter, seeing the guilt and pain etched in her features. She had been a pawn in David's game just as I had. I don't know, I said truthfully. But I think we need to find out. 6 months after David's arrest, I sat in the courthouse waiting room, smoothing my hands over the fabric of my new dress. The preliminary hearings had dragged on for months, but today would bring closure. David's plea deal was being finalized. Nervous? Chloe asked, taking the seat beside me. She looked professional and poised in her tailored suit, though I could see the tension in her shoulders. A little, I admitted. But ready for this to be over. Detective Adams approached us, his expression serious, but satisfied. Mrs. Campbell, Chloe, the judge has accepted the plea agreement. Your husband will serve 7 years for fraud and embezzlement, with additional time for identity theft and falsifying medical records. Relief washed over me. Thank you, Detective, for everything. You did the hard part, he said with a gentle smile. Standing up to him took real courage. After he left, Chloe squeezed my hand. I still can't believe we found out what Phase 2 was. I nodded grimly. The investigation had uncovered insurance policies David had taken out on me. Policies that would pay millions upon my death. The timing of these policies, coupled with his research into undetectable poisons found on his laptop, painted a chilling picture of what might have happened had I not escaped when I did. Let's not think about that today, I said firmly. Today, we focus on moving forward. Meredith joined us, carrying a folder. The forensic accountants have traced nearly 80% of the missing funds, she reported. Most of the clients will recover the majority of their investments. And Jessica Lee? Chloe asked, cooperating fully in exchange for immunity. She claimed she had no knowledge of David's crimes, but... Meredith shrugged skeptically. It doesn't matter, I said. She's out of our lives now. As we left the courthouse, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The nightmare wasn't completely over. There would still be civil suits, financial matters to resolve, and emotional wounds to heal. But the worst was behind us. Mom, Chloe said as we walked to the car. There's something I need to tell you. The serious tone in her voice made me pause. What is it, sweetheart? I've been offered a job with Detective Adams's department in victim advocacy, working with people who've experienced financial abuse and fraud. Pride swelled in my chest. That's wonderful. I want to help people like us, she continued, her eyes bright with purpose. Make sure they know they're not alone. Help them navigate the system. She hesitated. But it means I won't be moving back home permanently. Of course, I said, though a small part of me had hoped she would stay longer. You need your own life, your own space. What about you? She asked. Will you be okay in that house alone? There are so many memories. I smiled. Actually, I'm selling the house. You are. She looked surprised. But you've lived there for decades. Too many ghosts, I explained. Besides, I found a smaller place closer to Emily. It's time for a fresh start. Later that evening, Chloe and I invited Emily, Meredith, and Rebecca for dinner at my home. One of the last meals we'd share there before the sale was finalized. As I set the table in the dining room where David and I had hosted countless dinner parties over the years, I reflected on how much had changed. Need help? Rebecca asked, entering with a bottle of wine. Just finishing up, I said, arranging the silverware. Thank you again for everything. If you hadn't noticed David tampering with my mail. She waved away my thanks. I know what it's like to have someone make you doubt yourself. My first husband was a master at it. She set the wine down, her expression thoughtful. You know, when I first met you at those charity functions, I always thought you seemed constrained somehow, like you were holding yourself back. I admitted. David always had very specific ideas about how I should behave, what I should say. After a while, it became second nature to filter everything through his expectations. And now? She asked. I smiled. Now I'm discovering who I am without those filters. It's liberating. The doorbell rang, announcing Emily and Meredith's arrival. Soon, the dining room was filled with conversation and laughter, a stark contrast to the tense, controlled dinners of the past. A toast, Emily said, raising her glass as we finished the main course. To my brave sister, who refused to be silenced. To Mom, Chloe added, her eyes shining with tears and pride. Who taught me what real strength looks like. To all of you, I countered, looking around at these women who had formed an unexpected circle of support around me, for helping me find my voice again. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee, I noticed Chloe lingering by the family photos on the mantelpiece. I joined her, looking at the carefully curated images of our perfect family life. It's strange, she said softly. Looking at these now, I can see how controlled everything was, how Dad positioned us exactly how he wanted, made sure every picture told the story he wanted to tell. The perfect family, I murmured. I'm so sorry I didn't see through it sooner, she said, turning to me. When you first started questioning things, I just accepted Dad's explanation that you were confused. I should have stopped, I interrupted gently. We've been through this. You were manipulated, too. The important thing is that when you had reason to doubt, you investigated. You found the truth. She nodded, though I could see the guilt still lingered. Have you thought about what you'll do next, besides moving? Actually, yes. I smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement. I'm going back to school. School. Chloe looked surprised. For my master's in art history. I started the program before I met your father, but never finished. It had been one of the first things David had subtly discouraged after our marriage, suggesting it was impractical, that I should focus on building our home instead. Mom, that's amazing. Chloe hugged me tightly. You'll be brilliant. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in my bedroom, looking at the empty spaces where David's things had once been. The police had taken some items as evidence. I donated or discarded the rest. My phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. Sarah, it's Michael Scott. Rebecca gave me your number. I heard what happened with David. Would you like to meet for coffee sometime? Just as friends. No pressure. Michael Scott, Rebecca's brother-in-law. A quiet, thoughtful man I'd met briefly at charity events over the years. A widower who taught literature at the local university. I remembered his kind eyes, his genuine interest when I'd mentioned my love of art history. I found myself smiling as I typed a response. Coffee sounds wonderful. How about Tuesday? Setting the phone down, I moved to the window and looked out at the night sky. Tomorrow would bring more meetings with lawyers, more paperwork, more steps in the long process of disentangling my life from David's web of deceit. But for the first time in years, I felt truly free. 3 weeks later, I stood in the empty house for the last time. The furniture had been sold or moved to my new apartment. The walls were bare where family photos had once hung. My footsteps echoed in the vacant rooms. I walked through each space, not with sadness, but with a sense of completion. This house had been both prison and home to me. Now it would belong to a young family eager to create their own memories within its walls. In the kitchen, where I had prepared thousands of meals, where David had first begun criticizing my forgetfulness when I couldn't find items he deliberately misplaced, I placed a small envelope on the counter. Inside was a note for the new owners, wishing them happiness and harmony in their new home. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe, waiting outside whenever you're ready. Everything okay? I typed back, just saying goodbye. Be right out. As I walked toward the front door, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror, the last item still hanging on the walls. I paused, studying the woman looking back at me. My hair had more silver than it had 6 months ago, and fine lines had deepened around my eyes, evidence of both stress and newfound laughter. But there was something else there too. A steadiness, a quiet confidence that had been missing for so long I'd forgotten it was ever part of me. Goodbye, I said softly to the empty house. To the woman I'd been, to the life I was leaving behind. I stepped outside into the bright spring sunshine where Chloe waited by her car. Beside her stood Emily, Meredith, and Rebecca, my unlikely circle of warriors. Ready? Chloe asked, taking my bag. I looked back at the house one last time, then turned to the women who had helped me reclaim my life. Ready, I said, and walked toward my future without looking back. This journey, it changed everything. It taught me about the depths of betrayal, but also the incredible power of resilience and the fierce loyalty of true friends. If you've ever felt manipulated or found the courage to reclaim your own narrative, I want to hear about it. What was your moment of realization? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below because your story matters too. Ready, I said, and walked toward my future without looking back. That was the day I truly took my first free breath in years. The house, my gilded cage, was shrinking in the rearview mirror, replaced by the smiling faces of the women who had helped me break free. Chloe, Emily, Meredith, Rebecca, my unlikely circle of warriors, as I'd come to think of them. They weren't just friends, they were my lifeline, the brave souls who had shone a light into the darkest corners of my life and helped me find my way out. The next chapter of my life began not with a grand explosion, but with the quiet dignity of a new beginning. My new apartment, a charming 2-bedroom in a refurbished old building, felt like a breath of fresh air. It was smaller, yes, but it was mine. No ghosts of David's manipulation lingered in the sun-drenched living room. No silent accusations echoed in the kitchen. The walls were painted a soft, calming sage green, a stark contrast to the heavy, formal tones David had insisted upon in our previous home. Emily had helped me choose some simple, modern furniture, and together we'd unpacked boxes, each item I touched feeling like a relic from a past life. Moving closer to Emily was a comfort I hadn't realized I craved so deeply. We started a new ritual, Friday night dinners at her place or mine, where we'd cook together, laugh, and just talk. Real conversations, not the carefully curated, censored ones I'd grown accustomed to. It was a balm to my soul, reconnecting with a sister who had always known the real me, even when I'd forgotten her myself. She was a grounding force, her practical nature balancing my sometimes overwhelming emotions. Chloe, my sweet girl, was also finding her footing, though her journey was a heavier one. The initial shock and pain of discovering her father's betrayal had been immense, leaving her reeling. She had moved back in with me temporarily, not just to help, but because, I suspected, she needed to be close. She'd spend hours poring over documents with Meredith, her brow furrowed with concentration. Sometimes, I'd catch her staring into space, a look of profound guilt clouding her features. "Mom," she'd confessed one evening, her voice barely a whisper, "I can't believe I didn't see it. I helped him, I actively participated in isolating you." How could I have been so blind? I held her close, stroking her hair. Sweetheart, he manipulated us both. He was a master at it. He used your love for him, your trust, against you. It's not your fault. It was hard for her to accept, but with time, and with her new work, I hoped she would heal. The victim advocacy job at Detective Adams's department was more than just a job for her. It was a mission. She was pouring her heart and soul into it, determined to ensure others wouldn't suffer the same silent, insidious abuse. She'd call me, her voice buzzing with energy, telling me about a new case, a victim she was helping navigate the legal maze. It was her way of making amends, not just to me, but to herself. Seeing her find purpose in helping others, in using her pain to fuel compassion, was one of the greatest joys of my new life. Then there was Michael Scott. The coffee date he suggested felt like stepping onto unfamiliar ground. I hadn't dated in 30 years, and the thought was daunting. But Rebecca, bless her heart, had given him my number for a reason. I remembered his kind eyes from charity events, his thoughtful questions about books and art. We met at a small, independent coffee shop not far from the university where he taught. I remember walking in, my heart doing a strange flutter kick in my chest, a sensation I hadn't felt in what felt like a lifetime. He was already there, nursing a dark roast, a book open on the table beside him. When he looked up and smiled, a genuine, easy smile, the tension in my shoulders eased a fraction. Our conversation flowed surprisingly easily. We talked about literature, about art history, a passion I was rediscovering, and about life. He was a widower, and there was a quiet understanding in his eyes when I spoke, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared grief and resilience. He didn't pry about David, but he listened, truly listened, when I cautiously shared snippets of my past. It was refreshing, liberating, to be with someone who saw me, not David's wife, not the mentally declining woman, but Sarah. The first few months were a whirlwind of adjustments. My art history courses were challenging but exhilarating. Sitting in a lecture hall again, surrounded by eager young minds, felt utterly surreal. I was often the oldest student by a few decades, but that didn't matter. I devoured the material, my mind, once dulled by David's gaslighting, now felt sharp, alive, eager to learn. I made new friends, a mix of younger students who were fascinated by my real-world experience and older ones returning to academia, just like me. It was a community built on shared intellectual curiosity, a stark contrast to the superficial social circles David had cultivated. The legal battles with David were, predictably, messy. David, in his arrogant way, believed he could talk his way out of anything. He cycled through several expensive lawyers, convinced he could discredit Meredith's evidence and paint me as a delusional woman. But Meredith was formidable. She systematically dismantled his every defense, each piece of evidence a nail in his carefully constructed coffin. Chloe and I attended the sentencing. The courtroom was packed, filled with other victims. The Wilsons, of course, but also a dozen other families whose lives David had plundered. The air was thick with tension, anger, and a desperate hope for justice. When the judge finally handed down the sentence, 7 years for fraud and embezzlement, with additional time for identity theft and falsifying medical records, a collective sigh of relief swept through the room. I looked at David, his face pale, his usual swagger replaced by a defeated slump. For the first time, I saw not a powerful manipulator, but a small, desperate man. It wasn't triumph I felt, but a profound sadness for the wasted years, for the man he could have been, and for the damage he had wrought. Chloe squeezed my hand, her eyes still red-rimmed, but a flicker of resolve now shining through them. Justice, imperfect as it always is, had been served. Kevin, Chloe's ex-fiancé, also faced consequences. While he wasn't as deeply involved as David, Detective Adams's investigation uncovered his complicity in maintaining the mental decline, narrative, and receiving funds from David. He faced charges and eventually lost his license. Chloe was devastated again, but this time, her sorrow was mixed with a fierce sense of self-respect. "He chose money over honesty, Mom," she'd said, her voice firm. "He chose to be part of the lie." I deserve better. It was a painful but crucial step in her healing process. Meredith continued her incredible work. Her team of forensic accountants traced nearly 80% of the missing funds. It was a Herculean task, unraveling David's complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts. The Wilsons, along with most of the other clients, eventually recovered the majority of their investments, a small comfort but a significant victory. Rebecca, who had been instrumental from the start, became a close friend. Our shared experience of navigating betrayal had forged an unbreakable bond. She joined our Friday night dinners often, adding her sharp wit and insightful perspective. My family's trust fund, which David had sought to control, remained protected. Meredith had secured it long before he could make a move. The financial stability it provided was a blessing, allowing me to pursue my studies and rebuild my life without the immediate pressure of finding work. It meant I could breathe, truly. The media attention was a nuisance, a temporary price to pay for exposing David. My story, particularly the gaslighting and the fake medical records, resonated deeply with many. I received letters and emails from women who had experienced similar, insidious forms of emotional abuse. It was overwhelming at first, but it also made me realize the power of my story. I wasn't just a victim, I was a survivor, and my voice could help others. Slowly, carefully, my relationship with Michael blossomed. Our coffee dates turned into museum visits, then quiet dinners. He was patient, kind, and incredibly intelligent. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. He understood my need for caution, my hesitations. He never pushed, never made me feel rushed. With him, I felt seen, respected, and cherished in a way I hadn't experienced in decades. There was a gentle, comforting rhythm to our interactions, a profound difference from the tumultuous, controlling nature of my marriage to David. He brought me flowers, not as a manipulative gesture, but simply because he knew they'd brighten my day. He'd leave me little notes, quoting poets or sharing an interesting tidbit he'd read. These small, genuine acts of affection rebuilt my belief in kindness, in true partnership. One evening, as we sat on my balcony, watching the city lights twinkle, I found myself telling him the full, unvarnished story of David's betrayal, including the terrifying Phase 2 involving the life insurance policies. He listened, his hand gently covering mine, his gaze unwavering. When I finished, he didn't offer platitudes or try to fix it. He just held me, his embrace a silent promise of support and understanding. It was in that moment I knew this was real. This was different. Chloe's work at victim advocacy flourished. She found her passion, her voice, in helping others. She became a fierce champion for the vulnerable, her own painful experience giving her unparalleled empathy and insight. We had fully healed our mother-daughter bond. It was stronger and more authentic than it had ever been, built on honesty and mutual respect. She'd call me, not for guidance, but to share her successes, to bounce ideas off me, to just chat about her day. I was so incredibly proud of the woman she had become. I found myself increasingly involved in public outreach, invited by Meredith and Detective Adams to speak at various events. Sharing my story, raw and vulnerable, was terrifying initially. But each time, I saw nods of recognition, tears in other women's eyes, and felt the powerful connection of shared experience. It was cathartic, turning my pain into purpose. I spoke about gaslighting, about financial abuse, about the invisible chains that bind women. I emphasized the importance of trusting your instincts, of seeking help, and of building a strong support system. I saw David's tactics in a new light, not just as personal attacks, but as a systemic issue, and that empowered me to speak out even more. Therapy played a crucial role in my healing. A wise, compassionate therapist helped me untangle the years of gaslighting, to rebuild my self-trust, and to process the trauma. It was a long, often painful process, but it was essential. I learned to recognize the subtle ways I had internalized David's control, how I had questioned my own perceptions even after he was gone. Gradually, I reconnected with my intuition, that quiet inner voice he had tried so hard to silence. As my first year of graduate studies drew to a close, I stood on the precipice of a new summer, filled with possibility. I was preparing for a presentation on Baroque art, a topic I had come to adore. My confidence had grown exponentially. I was no longer Sarah, David's wife. I was Sarah Campbell, a student, a survivor, an advocate, a woman charting her own course. A chance encounter, or rather, a deliberately orchestrated one, brought me face to face with an old friend from my past life, someone who had believed David's narrative implicitly and had distanced herself from me. We were at a charity gala, an event I now attended with Michael, not out of obligation, but out of genuine interest. She approached me, her eyes starting nervously. "Sarah, you look wonderful." "I'm so sorry." "About everything." I truly believed David. I didn't hold anger, not anymore. "It's all right, Catherine," I said, my voice calm. He was very convincing. It takes a lot to see through such a well-crafted illusion. Her apology felt sincere, but the moment highlighted how far I had come. My social circle now consisted of people who celebrated my strength, not those who pitted my condition. My old house finally sold, and the last vestiges of that painful chapter were officially closed. The money from the sale, combined with the trust fund, meant I was financially secure, free from the shadow of David's embezzlement. The new family moving in, a young couple with 2 small children, seemed joyful, full of hope. I wished them well, knowing that my pain would not stain their new beginnings. The real marker of my resolution came a year after David's sentencing. I was walking across the university campus, my heart light, a gentle breeze rustling through the autumn leaves. I had just submitted my thesis proposal, a project that thrilled me to my core. My phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number, but a message popped up. "Sarah, it's David. I heard you're doing well." I wanted to apologize. "I regret everything." My hands trembled slightly as I read it. The old Sarah might have responded, might have sought closure, might have even harbored a flicker of hope for genuine remorse. But the new Sarah, she looked at the message, took a deep breath, and deleted it without replying. There was nothing left for him to say, nothing he could offer that I needed. My closure wasn't dependent on his acknowledgement or his regret. It was within me, a hard-won peace. Michael was waiting for me by the library steps, a warm smile on his face. He held out a single red rose. "Congratulations on the proposal, Professor Campbell-to-be," he said, his eyes twinkling. We walked hand in hand, talking about our day, our plans for the evening, our future. It was a future I was actively building, brick by joyful brick. I graduated with my master's in art history 2 years later, Chloe, Emily, Rebecca, and Michael all beaming in the audience. I pursued teaching, not at the university level, but through community workshops and local art museums, sharing my passion for art, making it accessible to everyone. It was fulfilling, creative, and utterly mine. Life wasn't a fairy tale ending, free of all struggles. There were still days when the shadows of the past flickered, moments of doubt or lingering pain. But now I had the tools, the support, and the inner strength to navigate them. I had learned that trust, once shattered, could be rebuilt, but only with caution and discernment. I had learned that my voice, once silenced, was powerful. And most importantly, I had learned that true freedom wasn't about escaping a prison, but about finding the courage to build your own wide-open world. And what a beautiful, expansive world it was. I was living proof that, even after the deepest betrayals, a vibrant, authentic, and joyful life was not just possible, but waiting to be claimed. If you've ever found yourself feeling invisible, silenced, or manipulated, I want you to know this. Your instincts are valid. Your voice matters. And there is an army of support out there, waiting to help you reclaim your own story. What did this journey make you reflect on about trusting your gut? Have you ever had to fight to be heard? Share your experiences below, because every story shared is a step towards collective healing. I'm reading every single comment.